All right, here we are, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Hope you've all have enjoyed the great weather we've had out here lately. And I apologize for making you give it up to come in for this, but we really have a really good program tonight, and I hope you will all enjoy it. I'm sure you will. I'm really looking forward to it. So it's if you have any questions, you can just put them right in the chat room. You can any questions at all or comments. What's your favorite bird? What kind of first year birds you've been seeing this year so far? I had a blue-headed vireo today, which was a good bird for me. I was telling Kathy here that I can't hear anymore, so I use my Merlin app and it up pops blue-headed vireo. So I'm like, holy moly, where is that? So I started looking around for about 20 minutes before I finally found it. So the Merlin app is really amazing. It is amazing. However, I say that I just don't, eBird everything that I hear on the Merlin app. I always have to find it first. It's more fun that way anyway. So I hope about everybody should be signed up now. I hope everybody's in. So with that, I'll welcome everybody. Thanks again for giving up a little bit of your late afternoon on this beautiful summer-like day. This is the final Young, Gifted, and Wild About Birds for 23, and it's being moderated by me, old, slow, and domesticated about birds. Anyway, before I introduce tonight's speaker, Kathi Borgmann, let me remind you, of course, that we'll be recording the presentation and we'll send you the video as soon as it's ready. Everybody will be muted. At the end of Kathy's presentation, we'll have time for a Q&A. So please use the chat for questions. We recommended also that you use speaker view. That makes things a whole lot easier and tighter. And closed captioning is available if you use it. So now let me introduce Kathi. I've been talking to her for a few minutes here before we started. She's an amazing young lady. She's done so much and accomplished so much everywhere. But currently she manages, her name is Kathi Borgmann, and she manages and coordinates the Cornell Labs communications. Her work focuses on engaging people in science, birds, and nature. What could be more direct to Connecticut Audubon Society's mission? I mean, it's perfect. For her master's degree, she examined the effects of non-native plants on nesting success of birds in rural and also in urban landscapes. Very, very interesting stuff. Her PhD work took her to the Sierra Nevada mountains. I bet there's little snow out there now. Where she led a wildlife restoration project. She worked with the U.S. Forest Service to restore mountain meadows and creeks for wildlife. Oh my God, that's a dream job. She also examined the effects that seasonal changes in the environment can have on the nesting success of songbirds. Studying birdsong has been a core love of Kathy's, and she eventually found her way to recording birdsong thanks to the Macaulay Library at Cornell. And she's recorded the vocalizations of birds throughout Central and South America. And she tells me that the Merlin app they're working on birds from all over the world. So when I go tomorrow and sign up for the Birds of East Africa, everything will be there. No, it's going to take a while, but I mean, that's really sweet. I mean, think about it. I mean, really, of the relatively small number of birds in North America, you go to East Africa, there's 1,700 bird species there. I mean, so that's going to take a while, but I'm looking forward to it. Anyway, Kathy's well-versed in all the great tools that Cornell Lab has created, such as eBird and the Merlin Bird app, which I was just talking about. Her presentation tonight is called From Sound Recording to eBird Status and Trends Maps, How Citizen Science Informs Bird Conservation. Great. Take it over, Kathi.
Wow, what an amazing intro. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you all tonight to share a little bit about some of my work. So before the 2019 landmark study that we've heard about before, thanks to Karina Newsom's great talk, that documented the losses of 3 billion birds, ornithologists were warning about population losses. And in 1989, John Terborg published the book, Where Have All the Birds Gone? Cherbourg writes, "If these excesses continue unchecked, we shall wake up one day to a drastically altered spring, one lacking many familiar bird species that we have taken for granted." He goes on to say that if we want to do something about this to prevent this, we need to do it soon. And he says, because 2000, the year 2000 will be too late. Those are some really sobering words. And the details that he laid out in that book really influenced my career path. Because I was determined to work towards understanding and preventing these bird losses, I started studying, as was mentioned in the introduction, the effects of invasive plants on nesting ecology of songbirds at The Ohio State University with Dr. Amanda Rodewald. Here, like as mentioned, I found northern cardinals and American robins that were nesting in honeysuckle and multiflora rose, both invasive species, were more likely to be depredated, to lose their clutches, to lose their babies in these urban environments. And it's in these urban environments where we're also seeing more invasive species encroaching into forests. And so I also was able to compare this to rural areas to really test this difference. And it seems that invasive plants are having a negative impact on our breeding birds. But feeling like I still had more questions than answers, I started my PhD in 2005 at the University of Arizona under Dr. Courtney Conway. Here I continued to study nest predation, where I found that in high elevation environments, the early bird doesn't always get the worm. It turns out that early arriving Wilson's warblers and dusky flycatchers in these high elevation environments in Lake Tahoe, there's not enough foliage cover in this early breeding season to protect them from nest predators. And there's also more nest predators searching the landscape, looking for food for themselves because there's less food available early in parts of the year. So this research really highlighted how phenology, so that's the timing, like the arrival date when first birds come, the first leaf out of vegetation, can have system-wide effects, which is really critical for understanding how climate change is going to impact these systems. And as a scientist, I'm continually asking new questions and trying to find new ways to engage, which is why my career path has been anything but a straight line, but I would not change it for the world. So after completing my PhD, I worked as a restoration ecologist in Audubon, California. And then I spent a couple of years recording bird sounds in Central and South America. And finally, did a small or large career pivot, depending on your perspective, to be a science writer and now communication manager at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. So you might be wondering, how does one go from being a research scientist to a science communicator? Well, for me, part of that answer is related to Terborg's book and also to this. Nearly 3 billion birds have disappeared since 1970. And when this paper was published, it sent shockwaves around the world. How are we going to reverse the declines and bring these birds back? Because even after all of my research, I just didn't feel like I was making enough impact. And so I came to realize that one of the underappreciated ways that we can help bring birds back is through storytelling. Getting people to care about birds and the environment and science communication is one way to help change those behaviors. It's a big task for sure, and one that seems really daunting, but I know we can do it. And bringing birds back is going to take all of us, from science communicators to researchers to bird watchers and nature lovers. Because bird watchers really do have an important role to play as citizen scientists. So let's take a look at this live eBird submission map from this year's Great Backyard Bird Count. And we'll watch as the world comes alive when people start reporting the species they saw. So as the shading moves, it's with the sunrise as it's coming across the globe. And all these lights just sparkle up. Those are people submitting what they saw. And it's just this really, it's breathtaking to know that there's that many people around the world counting birds and sharing their data. Because with so many species declining, citizen science data like this is key, because it's nearly impossible to conduct surveys across the United States, let alone the Americas or around the world, to find out how these species are doing, and then figuring out what we need to do to put in place to reverse those declines. Citizen science data allows rapid collection across large geographic areas like this, and it can have some real on-the-ground impacts. Now, eBird launched in 2002 and has grown tremendously over the course of the years. And now thousands of people share their observations with eBird every day. These observations become part of this massive database that researchers and scientists can use to evaluate and understand more about our bird populations. eBird now has more than 99 million checklists with more than 1 billion observations of birds. That's a lot of data. So how does this data inform conservation? Well, let's take a moment and walk through some of these examples of how your birding is powering the future of conservation. In California, tricolored blackbirds seem to be in trouble, but nobody really knew just how bad, in part because these partially nomadic flocks can be really hard to survey. They will nest by the thousands in a California field one year, but be gone the next. So researchers at the Cornell lab used eBird data and found these populations were declining by 34% since 2007. And they found out that the decline seemed to be mostly occurring on the breeding grounds. So these results spurred the state of California to approve the Endangered Species Act protection for tricolored blackbirds in 2018. And also tipped off the researchers that focusing on those breeding ground events would be their best bet to stave off declines. Since this happened in 2018, we have seen some populations of tricolored blackbirds stabilize, but in other areas, unfortunately, populations have continued to decline because of land conversion and pesticides. In a similar example, eBird data was used to inform conservation for shorebirds, this time also in California in the Central Valley. And we know that shorebirds is a group that really needs our attention because the State of the Birds report that Karina Newsom mentioned, shorebirds are declined by 33% since 1970. In the Central Valley, rice farms provide some really great habitat for shorebirds, but the timing when shorebirds left water on their fields didn't always line up with shorebird arrival, which meant there's less habitat for these shorebirds to rest and refuel. So that's where this eBird data comes in that's submitted by citizen scientists. These models told the people on the ground when the shorebirds were turning up. So then the Nature Conservancy was able to pay these rice farmers to leave water on their field for a little bit longer to help those migrating shorebirds. So it's a win-win for birds and for people. In another example closer to home for you all in Connecticut, eBird data and some advanced statistical modeling was used in New Jersey to start to figure out and address sea level rises that can benefit birds, black rails, and communities. Researchers looked at potential black rail habitat across the landscape and combined it with land ownership and sea level rise projections to create a management plan that addresses sea level rise while planning among public and private lands that can benefit both birds and people. So this eBird data really does have some conservation and management actions that go along with it. And also, I think in a time when some of our environmental regulations seem to be threatened, it's important to highlight ways in which these regulations have improved the health and well-being of us and of the birds. Researchers used some eBird data and found out that improved air quality under the federal program to reduce ozone pollution may have actually averted the loss of 1.5 billion birds during the last 40 years. That's great data to share with our policymakers to support these environmental regulations. Another amazing tool that many of you have probably seen that's been made possible by birders and citizen scientists are the eBird abundance imaginations that show you when and where birds are throughout the year. Let's watch the seasonal abundance patterns of the sometimes elusive yellow-billed cuckoo. So during the non-breeding season, we see them in South America or northern Colombia and Paraguay. And as spring approaches, they spread out with large numbers arriving in the US in May and spreading further northward. So with these tools, I'm not sure I would have ever known that yellow-billed cuckoos spend the non-breeding period as far south as Paraguay. It's just really eye-opening that then researchers, scientists, anyone can use to start asking and probing for new questions. In addition to these seasonal changes, the status maps that are produced can help identify where populations on the landscape occur. The Macaw Recovery Network seeks to protect parrots throughout Central America, but for effective conservation, they need to know where the parrots are. And for the critically endangered great green macaw, they can be difficult to survey, again, because they move across the landscape a lot. And so you really can't count them without relying on citizen science data. So these new relative abundance visualizations provide range-wide estimates of relative abundance for organizations like the Macaw Recovery Network for effective conservation planning with their partners. eBird data is also used to identify conservation priority areas. So this here is a new tool that's called Shorebird Viz. It's just to highlight the relative abundance of shorebirds in these areas. And the Important Bird Area Coordinator at BirdLife International is using this Shorebird Viz tool to guide the selection of important bird areas that are important globally for conservation of bird species. And Shorebird Viz allows them at a glance to see where these shorebird species are on the landscape and where they're most abundant to try to identify the sites where there needs to be formal protection. But citizen science data can also help us understand wildlife populations that can then be used to inform policies designed to safeguard birds. So the US Fish and Wildlife Service needed to identify places where they could put wind energy projects that would have minimal risk to bald eagles. So they would frequently conduct these aerial surveys, but these things are expensive, they're really time consuming, it's hard to get full coverage. So they turned to eBird data and thought, well, can we use eBird data to supplement some of these surveys so that we know for sure that we're not going to inflict harm on bald eagles if we need to put up some green energy projects. And they found that, yeah, indeed, this data that's submitted by citizen scientists in conjunction with these statistical models really is providing the best high quality resolution information available that are key pieces that are needed to advise wind energy policy. So using the citizen science data, it just really created this win-win situation for bald eagles. We know they're not getting harmed, and for green energy. Another new product that we've produced with citizen science data and statistical modeling are what we call the eBird trends maps. So these might be new to some of you. So let me just walk through a little bit what you're looking at here. The red dots indicate declining populations, and the blue indicate increasing populations within a 27 by 27 kilometer area, which is the finest scale resolution available to help pinpoint exactly where on the landscape birds are doing well and where they are in trouble. So this is a map here of the American robin during the non-breeding season. And at first glance, there's large swaths of red are just really shocking. How could it be that American robins, which seem to be everywhere, could be declining so much throughout their range? And that's the thing, is that observing changes in abundance can be hard to see in real time, especially if these changes are occurring slowly year after year. But these slow declines can really add up and are a real wake-up call. Declines observed, especially in these really dark areas during the winter, really highlight the need of, maybe we should start doing some studies in Florida. Why are there so many American robins declining in that region? They're just a huge wake-up call. You can search for over 600 species and look at trends, birds in the United States and outside of the United States, and see how birds are doing. They're available online at ebird.org. But if we take a look at another species out in the east that highlights the importance of this regionally specific data. So this is for the wood thrush population, and we see large regional variation with a patchwork of increases and decreases. And the first question that comes to mind when looking at this is, well, why are they decreasing in the mid-Atlantic, but seemingly doing well in the Appalachian region? Well, coincidentally, the Appalachian Mountain Joint Venture, which is a partnership of over 50 state, federal, and nonprofit organizations, they worked on implementing management projects to restore the age and structural diversity of these hardwood forests in this region. So while we can't say a cause equals effect in this situation, but maybe that's why they're increasing. And now scientists can go study that to see if that's actually what's causing it and then replicate those conservation successes elsewhere. eBird trend maps like this also provide detailed looks into populations not possible with traditional range maps. So on the right is a traditional range map that you might have in your field guide of the Carolina wren. But when we look at these trend maps, we can also see that, wow, look over here in Vermont, we're seeing this increase. Blue is increasing, remember, increasing in Carolina wren populations and really far north and into Canada. I mean, we don't see that on a traditional range map, right? And this could be, not for sure, an indication that Carolina wrens are moving north with climate change. But again, this allows researchers to start asking new questions. It's a super powerful tool. But citizen science data doesn't stop at eBird observations. It's also about recording bird sounds, and those sounds can help us better understand birds and support conservation. The Macaulay Library at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology is the world's largest digital library of bird sounds and photos. The library holds more than 43 million bird photos and 1.6 million audio recordings. And I have to say, if you've never tried sound recording before, you gotta try it. Recording just gives you this whole new perspective and creates these really super intimate moments with birds that you just never really experienced before. So we're gonna switch gears now and we're gonna talk all about how sound recordings shared by bird watchers have made an impact. So most people in the Northern Hemisphere tend to think that birdsong isn't exclusive to males, because in the Northern Hemisphere, many male birds are conspicuous and they're quite vocal. But around the world, more than 600 songbird species, females also sing. We even have some species in the US where females sing. And our knowledge of female song has come in part due to citizen science recordings from the Female Birdsong Project. This groundbreaking work not only changed our view of who's singing, but also of evolution. Understanding that females sing means that sexual selection just doesn't happen to males. It's females too that may be under pressure to sing. And some female birds sing to attract their mates, to tell them when they're ready to breed. Others sing to defend their resources, such as nesting sites or food for themselves or for their young. And being able to collect sound recordings for thousands of species around the world is what really led to these critical advances and changed and opened our eyes to the world of female birdsong. Sharing sound recordings also helps us learn more about how birdsong evolves. So researchers started noticing that some white-throated sparrow songs had a different ending. So they dug into the Macaulay Library and found out that there's a new white-throated sparrow song that was ending with a two-syllable phrase that you can see this single dot over here with these, over here that where the originated, and then it spread across Western Canada into Eastern North America in the 21st century. So by the time 2000 came around, this two-syllable ending was found only in Western Canada, but by 2019, birds as far east were all singing the two-syllable ending. So you learn a little bit about cultural evolution of song made possible by recordings shared by citizen scientists. Recordings are also really useful for separating species. And I love this example because I was fortunate enough to be in South America recording some of these ant pittas. And my recordings actually helped influence some of this work. And I thought that it was really exciting for me. So recordings from the archive were used to find that this Rufous ant pitta, which looks pretty similar, is not just one species, but 16 different species. So here's an example of audio of these three species, and while they look alike, they sound a little different. So let's take a listen.
Rufous ant pitta, Periha. Rufous ant pitta, Sierra Nevada. Rufous ant pitta, Bolivian.
Can you hear the difference among those species? So it's no surprise that songs and calls are key to identifying a bird species because, after all, birdsong is how the birds themselves figure out who's who among the various species in their area. Ascribing species status like this to split the Rufous antpitta into 16 can be helpful to secure conservation funding for some species and in some areas, or provide protective policies in others. So it is really important to understand sort of who's who, and song recording can really help that. Oops.
Rufous antpitta.
But cryptic species like these antpittas aren't just lurking in the tropics, because in fact, there could be new species lurking in many of your backyards in North America, just waiting for more recordings. Some of our common birds, like warbling vireos, might actually be two different species, and vocal recordings are really going to be the key to unlocking that mystery. So let's take a listen to, first we'll start with the Western warbling vireo and see if you can't hear the difference. And let's try oh, did I mess up? That was the Eastern warbling vireo, and now we'll do the Western warbling vireo. So they sound a little bit different. So the next time you hear a warbling vireo, see if you can't even just pull out your phone and grab a recording with it and share it with your eBird checklist. And maybe your recordings will be part of the data that's used to separate these two species into Eastern and Western warbling vireos. But besides identifying new species, sound recordings can also be used in conservation. So many parrots have regional dialects, much like humans. And so researchers in Brazil started wondering, well, could they use recordings in the archive to figure out the dialects of certain parrot species and understand where they come from? And they thought that this could be useful in situations for the illegal wildlife trade. So when parrots are recovered during this illegal wildlife trade, can they, record that captive bird and find out, well, where does it belong? If we're going to send it back home, what part of Brazil should I return it to? Because we know that when you're bringing birds that have been taken away, it's best to put them back in the area where they came from for increased survival. So there's all these really super interesting and unique ways that sound recording can be used, and the sky is the limit. That's the really other cool thing about having all this data in one spot, whether it's eBird and Macaulay Library, is you just never know the kind of questions that you're going to be able to ask, and that's it's so powerful. But probably one of the most fun ways that citizen science has been used is in Merlin Bird ID. So all of your eBird observations and all of the sound recordings that you share or that citizen science share power this app. That's what makes this thing possible, because we look at all the data submitted by eBird to tell you what's likely in your neighborhood when you pull up Merlin and so you say sort likely by, and that tells you who's going to be nearby, as well as all of those sound recordings. We couldn't do this app and identify who's singing without those sound recordings. So it's really great to know that your efforts are really, it's going to be the thing, the key, the spark that it's going to take to get someone else engaged in nature. And that's that behavioral change I talked about at the beginning of the talk. Because sometimes all it really takes for people to put a name to a bird they spot is, just start paying attention more and start engaging with nature. And this is the tool to do that. It's really been a game changer. And you all who contribute data can be really proud that you help make this possible, to help engage the public and birders, because I use this every spring because I'm rusty every spring and I need to remember who's that bird. So it's great. So I've hoped with all of the examples that I've shared that I've convinced you of the value of citizen science data to power conservation and reverse bird declines. But if you would really like to learn more about how to record bird songs and start e-birding, we have 2 courses that can help you get started. We produced a online self-paced how to record birdsong class that will walk you through the basics of recording with specialized equipment and also just with your smartphone. And then the eBird Essentials class, which is free. So if you've ever been intimidated by eBird, first of all, don't be. It's really easy. But this course will just show you all the ropes on how to make the most of eBird and using your phone to record the birds that you see and hear. But there's more, and that's really the focus of my career now. As I mentioned, I shifted gears from a research scientist to a science communicator. Because I think the most important thing, as I mentioned, is getting the word out and telling stories to help change people's behavior and to change those policies to safeguard our birds. We need to have the research, we need to do all of that thing, but we also need people to spark that joy and tell those stories and engage people. So I'm encouraging you to also share your stories with your friends and family to help raise awareness, show people Merlin Bird ID, get them excited, help that spark, use your voice when you go to the polls, anything to, continue that journey, because like I said, it's going to take all of us to reverse these declines in birds. So with that, I'll take questions.
Hey, everybody, it's Tom Anderson. I think Miley's going to hop back on as well. We have a couple of quick questions while we're waiting for Miley. Both of them have to do with sort of the evolution of bird song. A fellow named Ben Myers from out in the Mystic, Connecticut area asked, do we know the reasons why bird calls can change over time?
Yeah, so there's a lot that we don't know, but in the example of the white-throated sparrow, what was happening is these populations ended up sort of wintering in Mexico in the same spot and like learning different songs from each other on the wintering grounds and then dispersing kind of differently. And so the song kind of evolved based on learning on the wintering grounds they found.
Well, though that's interesting because what occurred to me, the question that occurred to me when you were showing the map about the white-throated sparrows was this white-throated sparrow songs changed from west to east, starting, I forget what the year was, but yeah. Did that song change because one bird sang a different song and another bird heard it and then he sang it and then another bird heard that and it's like a game of telephone? Yeah,
kind of. I mean, yeah. So some birds learn song. And some birds, it's innate. So that's sort of different. You often don't see that cultural evolution, as they refer to it, in species that are innately learn song. So.
Hey, here's Miley.
Okay. Yeah, I'm here. I'm going through the chat room to see what questions there might be. Tom, you probably see these chat room questions as well.
Yeah, I asked a couple. What I thought I'd do, Miley, is I'll pick them out and I'll throw them out there and you guys talk about them.
Okay, good.
So here's a Merlin related question, probably for Kathi. Can I upload a sound to a bird and will it tell me to, I'm sorry, can I upload a sound to eBird and will it tell me what bird it is?
Right now, you're only allowed to upload sounds through the Merlin Bird ID app. So if you had some sound recording on a different device, you could upload it to your phone and then have Merlin identify it on your phone. But we don't have any of those capabilities on a desktop computer. It's all through the mobile app of Merlin.
Here's a couple that I would consider to be tough ones.
Uh-oh.
If songs can change, then how do you know if you are hearing a new species or the same species with an evolving song?
Right.
That's a very good question. I think that you have to see it then, right? Like you would be able to tell and then make comparisons based on a bunch of different recordings that have been archived, whether or not that song is changing. And that's really the power of it. So yeah, it's a tough question, but I think that like having a recording is going to help answer that. I don't know the answer myself.
It may be something that needs work in the lab by scientists as opposed to somebody with binoculars and an iPhone out in the field.
Oh, I don't know.
as you divide species, hold on a second. As you divide species by song, does the DNA, as you divide species by song, does the DNA vary between them?
Right, exactly. So when people are looking at splitting different species, I talked a lot about the sounds and how that's differs. But in order for a species to be split and be accepted by our governing body who makes these decisions, they look at the whole suite. So they're looking at genetic differences, song differences, plumage differences, behavioral differences. So most often than not, it's not just one of those things that's going to split the species. It's multiple of those pieces also all have to be different for them to be considered a separate species. So the Rufous ant pitta example, there's been a ton of genetic work that was done on that species to really identify, okay, those genetics, they're very different. They're also super isolated by different mountain ranges. So that species exists in the Andes in these different pockets that they're just not crossable. So we know that there's not any interbreeding.
And Steve Broker, who's a friend of ours from the New Haven area, adds geographic isolation as well.
Yes, exactly.
Here's my kind of question. This is for maybe both of you can answer this. What's the rarest bird you have ever seen?
That's a deadly question.
Yeah. The rarest bird I've ever seen. I saw a recurve-billed bushbird in Colombia that is pretty rare.
Miley, what about you?
Borneo bristlehead.
And like, so how rare is rare? Are these birds like in danger of being extinct?
Probably, as far as the bristlehead goes, is probably because there's not hardly any observers where the bird's range is. So it's rarely seen, but it's probably not, like on the endangered list.
The rarest bird I ever saw was a whooping crane along the Platte River.
That's a good one.
So let's see. Anybody other questions? That looks like that's all the questions we have.
I have a good one from Ron Bullfinch. He wants to know, how do crows stick together in a flock? And the answer is relatively simple. It's Velcro. Sorry.
Thank you, Miley.
Well, that's one of my dad jokes.
Frank Matlick, who was on our Milford Point Coastal Center Regional Board, asks, is there a way to download the chart of the seven simple actions to help birds?
Yeah, I can pass a link to you so that when you send out the recording, it'll include that link. Yep.
Yeah, and a couple of years ago, we did our own, a little bit more expanded. We did 10 things you can do to help birds in Connecticut, so I'll include that as well.
Yeah, great.
The other thing is, eBird is such an incredibly valuable tool for bird conservation. I don't think they haven't advertised it enough. I think it should be a part of every major field guide. There should be an encouragement to record your birds through eBird, maybe even short tutorials on how to use eBird. I don't think maybe it is, but in my view, I don't think it's quite as well advertised as it should be, because it really is such an incredibly valuable thing for conservation. Every field guide, every bulletin, every article that comes out about birds should really encourage people to use eBird. Am I wrong?
No, I mean, yeah, we should, and we are trying to encourage as many people as possible. And it's actually been mentioned quite frequently in any articles that we hear about birding online. People talk about it at conferences, birding conferences all over. And the tutorials are in that eBird Essentials course, which is free. It's an online course that you can take at your own pace. And we keep updating it because we're always trying to come with the next thing and improve the app and all of these things. So we try to keep things updated.
And I'm especially interested in the younger generation of kids who aren't really, expert birders, but they're interested in birds. Like me, when I was 7 years old, I'd go to my golden guide to the birds and look up birds. If there was eBird ought to be advertised even for the youngster, even for the young kids. I mean, my 5-year-old grandson can use a computer better than I can. He's got all his apps and everything. He should be using eBird.
Yeah, we have to be careful. We don't, parents have to allow the permissions in order to get into eBird. There's some
Right.
issues with minors and using these technologies. So yeah,
Yeah.
with
But
parental supervision.
so is that the end of the questions?
No. A number of new ones have come in from
Good.
James Reed. Let's see if I can get this right. If birds have multiple calls, for example, territorial versus mating, is eBird evolving? Is eBird evolving so that it will soon be able to capture that type of call? I think maybe he means Merlin instead of eBird, but
Yeah. Well, we hope that we would be able to keep up with that. But as we are sort of right now, Sound ID is available for the US and Canada and for European countries, and we're trying to expand outside of that. So I think once we finish the rest of the countries in the world and make Sound ID available, then we would probably go back and review those sounds again and send them through the AI models to make sure it's catching any of that if should happen. One thing that you'll notice when you use Merlin is that if you're trying to record something like a northern mockingbird, which is a mimicker, you're not going to get the good results, right? Because the AI model can't just really distinguish, because mockingbirds are that good at making, sounds of different species. So it can be difficult for that model. We have to remember that this is a computer making the suggestion. So as was mentioned, I think earlier in the call, that Merlin is a great tool to help you sort of narrow down your choices, but you should always try to find the bird who's singing to verify it with your own eyes. Don't always trust Merlin, because Merlin is a computer. So be sure that you look for the bird, like Merlin was telling you that the blue-headed vireo is singing. Well, go find it and verify, right. And then you can report it on your eBird checklist.
So let me give you an example. Merlin has a whole wide variety of different calls for different species. So I'm out in the forest or at the edge of a forest, and I hear this bird call, and I turn on Merlin, and Merlin says, "Oh, that's a tufted titmouse." I'm like, "Ha ha, that's not a tufted titmouse. I know what a tufted titmouse sounds like." And so I finally find the bird. By God, it was a tufted titmouse. Tufted titmice make a whole world of different bird songs.
They
And,
do. It's amazing.
It is amazing.
very interesting. Here's a question from a fellow named Thomas Zissou. Can you access eBird Essentials on the eBird app?
You cannot. So eBird Essential is only available on your computer or your tablet or the website. Like, you can take it on your phone, but just not through the app, if that makes any sense. So it's through the website.
Miley, going back to something you said earlier about crows, Jennifer Frank says, very bad pun. You should be sorry, LOL.
Oh, I got a million of those, but I won't.
Yeah, we can also mute you, so that's fine. Here's a question from Ann Lawchick. Do you have a program that could be sent to elementary school teachers?
Yeah, great question. We do. We have a whole program called K-12 Education, and they provide educational resources for teachers to teach in their classrooms. And they do have some programs for the older kids on teaching them to use eBird. So if you just go to birds.cornell.edu, and you can look for our K-12 education program, and you can download resource packets, teacher information, whole sorts of things and curriculum that are available.
Terrific. Here's a basic but an important one. Someone asks, how does eBird differ from Merlin?
Great question. So eBird is the app that you take out in the field to record what you saw and what you heard. It's a tally. So it's your checklist. So I went out birding today and I saw 3 American robins, 2 tufted titmice, 1 yellow-rumped warbler. and on and on and on. And that's my birding event. I start my time, I end my time, all of that good stuff. So it's a checklist. Merlin Bird ID is to help you identify those birds. So it's your field guide. So eBird's your checklist and Merlin's your field guide.
Excellent, thank you. Another question from James Reed, who asked the question earlier. Can you talk a bit about the difference about the software used when processing bird calls within Merlin? It seems to me that it must be pretty powerful. How does it do it in layperson terms, please?
Oh,
boy.
you've asked the wrong person that question. It is super powerful. I know that a lot of it is run in the cloud through these sophisticated artificial intelligence models, and that's as far as I can go. Apologies.
Okay. Joyce Lights, our Chief Operating Officer and Development Director, points out that our Migration Madness event, which is coming up May 20th and 21st, has a school-based day on May 19th, and teachers can register for their class to take part in our Migration Madness Birdathon, if the teachers out there are interested. Here's a mockingbird question.
Okay.
From Donna Hansen. Do mockingbird songs vary by their location and surrounding to other species?
Absolutely. It's so cool. And that's one of the things you could do and poke around in the Macaulay Library Archive and search for northern mockingbird, and then search and change by location and play a mockingbird song from, say, California, and play one from New York. And you'll notice that they're singing different songs because they're learning their bird songs from different neighbors, right? So they might be mimicking a wren tit in California, or something, and then out here they're mimicking a northern cardinal. So yeah, it's a cool, fun activity. So that's for you. Pack that away for your winter day when need something to do.
In New York City, they mimic car horns and dogs barking and everything.
Cool. I will get some of those links from you again, Kathy, and when I send out my follow-up email. That actually is the last question, and it is a little bit before 8, 10 before 8. So unless there are any more, or Miley, if you have more to ask.
No, I think that was great. This was a really great presentation, one of our best presentations, because it's so timely. Number one, it's the springtime, birds are beginning to sing. It's a great time to hook up with eBird and Merlin and try it out. I mean, you'll find that it's just these are things that I could only dream about when I was like in high school or beyond or earlier. I mean, who would ever think that you could have a voice recognition system that could identify birds by song? I used to have to go out and try to hear the song, then try to identify the bird. Of course, that was a good way to learn your birds too. But this is so very helpful for conservation on the worldwide basis. And Kathy, you did a great job. I think it was really spectacular. I mean, you laid out the whole smorgasbord for us here, and I think it was really good. And so thank you so much. This, as I mentioned, this is also the final Young Gift in the Wild About Birds for 2023. Karina Newsom, Joanna Wu, Nico Jimenez, Allison Black, and finally Kathy Borgmann to really put the topping on the cake. So anyway, I hope everybody's enjoyed them. We've been saying throughout that your donations for this year's series would go directly into improving and maintaining our sanctuaries. And we are working hard on all of our sanctuaries. This is going to be a huge help. So your donations now add up to more than $7,000. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I think the best way to celebrate this is to go visit our sanctuaries. You can find them all on our website, ctaudubon.org/sanctuaries. And actually, that's except for some more bad jokes. Anyway, so that's about it for tonight. And thank you all for your support of conservation in Connecticut, to an organization that I hold near and dear to my heart. So thank you all so very much. And Kathy, thank you as well. If you're ever in town, I'd love to go on a bird walk with you sometime, so let us know. I'll roll out the red carpet.
Absolutely. Thanks again for having me. It was a pleasure to chat with all of you. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you all.
Bye.
Have a great week.